On the morning of December 15th, 1944, Private First Class Dirk Vlug stood at an American roadblock on Leyte Island in the Philippines. He had a bazooka, 6 rounds of ammunition, and a job: keep Japanese tanks from reaching Ormoc City. What happened next would take 30 minutes and earn him the Medal of Honor. Vlug would face 5 enemy tanks alone under machine gun fire. He would use 5 of his 6 rounds and he would destroy every single tank that came at him. This is how one man stopped an armoured assault by himself. In December 1944, the fight for Leyte Island was entering its final phase. American forces had landed 2 months earlier on October 20th. General Douglas MacArthur had waded ashore and spoken into a radio microphone with his famous words, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." But returning was the easy part. Holding the island and pushing out the Japanese required controlling the roads, the ports, the airfields, and the high ground. The Japanese understood this too. They had reinforced Leyte with more than 34,000 troops through Ormoc Bay on the west side of the island. Ships arrived at night, unloaded men and supplies, and left before American aircraft could catch them. Ormoc City sat at the head of that bay. It was the last major port the Japanese controlled on Leyte. Lose Ormoc, lose Leyte. Lose Leyte, lose the Philippines. The stakes were clear to both sides. The battle for Leyte had been brutal. The Japanese Navy had thrown everything they had at the American invasion fleet in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. They lost. The Imperial Japanese Navy was finished as an offensive force, but on land, Japanese soldiers were still fighting hard. They had dug into the mountains, fortified the towns, and fought for every road and every ridge. American forces were grinding forwards, but progress was slow. Tropical rain turned the roads into mud. Malaria and other diseases killed as many men as bullets did. Supplies had to be brought through jungle trails that barely existed. Vlug had enlisted in the army from Grand Rapids in April 1941, 8 months before Pearl Harbor. He knew war was coming. Everyone did. Germany was smashing through Europe. Japan was conquering China. America was preparing. Vlug joined the 126th Infantry Regiment, part of the 32nd Infantry Division. The 126th was originally part of the Michigan National Guard. When war broke out, they were federalized and sent to training camps. They trained for Europe. They expected to fight Germany, but in early 1942, the orders changed. The 126th was turned around and sent to the Pacific. They shipped out to Australia, trained in the brutal heat, and then deployed to New Guinea in September 1942. New Guinea was hell. Dense jungle, steep mountains, mud, rain, disease, and an enemy that refused to surrender. The 126th fought across the Owen Stanley Range, through places like Boona and Sanananda. They learnt jungle warfare the hard way. By the time they landed on Leyte in late December 1944, they were veterans. They knew how to move through jungle, how to set up defensive positions, how to deal with snipers and ambushes. They also knew the Japanese would fight to the death. By December 15th, the 126th was holding positions along the Ormoc Road near the town of Limon. This road was critical. It connected Ormoc City to Japanese forces operating in the mountains to the north and east. If Japanese tanks broke through American roadblocks on this road, they could reinforce their units fighting further north. They could also disrupt American supply lines. American command could not let that happen. Roadblocks were set up at key points. Vlug's battalion was assigned to hold one of them. The roadblock itself was nothing fancy. Logs dragged across the road, sandbags stacked up to create firing positions, a few foxholes dug into the dirt on either side. The men stationed there had rifles, a Browning .30 caliber machine gun, and one bazooka. The bazooka was the M1A1, a tube-shaped rocket launcher about 5 feet long and weighing 13 pounds. It fired a 60mm rocket with a shaped charge warhead designed to punch through armor. The rocket weighed 3.4 pounds. When the shaped charge detonated, it created a jet of molten metal that could penetrate several inches of steel. Effective range was listed as 300 yards, but in combat, most crews fired at much closer ranges. At 100 yards, a solid hit would destroy most tanks. At 200 yards, accuracy dropped significantly. The bazooka required 2 men to operate under normal conditions, one to aim and fire, one to load the rocket from the rear. Loading took time. The assistant had to make sure the electric contact was good, then tap the gunner on the shoulder to signal that it was ready. Vlug would be doing this alone. Japanese tanks were not the most advanced in the world, but they were effective in the Pacific theater. The Type 95 Heigo light tank was the most common Japanese tank of the war. It weighed about 7.4 tons. It was 14 feet long and stood about 7 feet tall. The tank had a 3-man crew, driver, gunner, and commander. The commander also operated the rear machine gun. The main gun was a Type 94 37mm gun mounted on a turret. This gun could fire armor-piercing rounds and high-explosive rounds. It was extremely effective against infantry, light vehicles, and fortifications. Against other tanks, it was less effective. The Heigo also had 2 Type 97 machine guns. One was mounted in the hull, operated by the driver. The other was mounted in the rear of the turret, operated by the commander. Armor protection on the Heigo was thin. The thickest armor was 12mm. Most of the armor was only 6 to 8mm thick. This made the tank vulnerable to anti-tank rifles, heavy machine guns, and rocket launchers like the bazooka. But thin armor had advantages. The tank was light, which meant it was fast. Top speed on roads was 28 miles an hour. On rough terrain, it could still move at 16 miles per hour. This speed made the Heigo dangerous in ambushes. It could burst out of the jungle, fire its guns, and retreat before heavier weapons could respond. In the dense jungles and narrow roads of the Philippines, speed and maneuverability mattered more than thick armor. At 9:17 on the morning of December 15th, American lookouts at the roadblock spotted movement on the road to the west. Dust cloud, engine noise. Then they saw them. Tanks, Japanese tanks, moving fast, heading straight towards the roadblock. 5 of them. The lookout shouted a warning. Men scrambled to their positions. The machine gunner swung his weapon towards the road. Riflemen took cover behind sandbags. Vlug grabbed the bazooka and the canvas bag containing 6 rockets. He slung the bazooka over his shoulder and ran forward, away from the roadblock, towards the approaching tanks. The other soldiers shouted at him to come back. Running towards tanks was suicide, but Vlug knew what he was doing. The bazooka was only effective at close range. If he stayed at the roadblock 300 yards back, the rocket might miss. The tanks would overrun the position or simply tear it apart with their guns. The only way to stop them was to get close and hit them before they could react. Vlug moved to the side of the road, using trees and undergrowth for cover. The lead tank was 150 yards out now. Machine gun fire opened up from the tank, sweeping the roadblock. Bullets snapped through the air. Vlug dropped to one knee behind a fallen log. He pulled a rocket from the bag, loaded into the rear of the bazooka, and checked the electrical contact. Good. He shouldered the weapon, aimed at the lead tank, and squeezed the trigger. The rocket ignited with a sharp crack. It launched towards the tank, leaving a thin trail of smoke. Flight time was less than a second. The rocket struck the tank's hull just below the turret. The shaped charge detonated, and a jet of molten metal punched through the thin armor into the crew compartment. The explosion killed the driver instantly. The gunner and commander were shredded by fragments. The tank rolled forwards a few more yards and stopped. Smoke poured from the hatches, fire erupted inside. 1 down, 4 to go. The second tank was right behind the first. It slowed, trying to maneuver around the burning wreck. The crew had seen what had happened. They knew there was a bazooka somewhere ahead. The tank commander ordered his crew to dismount. They would assault the bazooka position on foot, kill the shooter, then remount and continue. The crew hatches popped open. 3 men climbed out and started running towards Vlug's position. They carried rifles and grenades. Vlug dropped the bazooka and drew his sidearm, a .45 caliber pistol. He fired 3 shots. The first man dropped. The other 2 stopped, turned and ran back towards the tank. They scrambled inside and slammed the hatches shut. Big mistake. Now, they were trapped in a stationary target. Vlug picked up the bazooka, loaded another rocket and aimed at the second tank. The tank was trying to back up, but the narrow road and the wreck of the first tank blocked their path. Vlug fired. The rocket hit the turret. The explosion was massive. The ammunition inside the tank had ignited. Secondary explosions blew the turret clean off the hull. 2 down, 3 to go. The remaining 3 tanks were now fully aware they were under attack. They spread out as much as the road would allow. The 3rd tank moved forward on the left side of the road. The 4th tank stayed center. The 5th tank moved to the right. All 3 opened fire. Machine gun bullets dug up the ground around Vlug. The 37mm guns fired. 1 round hit a tree 10 feet behind him. The tree exploded in splinters. Another round hit the ground in front of him, kicked up dirt and rocks. Vlug ignored the fire. He moved to his left, flanking the 3rd tank. The tank was focused on the roadblock, firing at the American positions. The crew had not seen Vlug move, so he circled around until he had a side shot on the tank. He loaded a rocket, aimed at the side armor, and fired. A direct hit. The rocket penetrated and detonated inside. The tank shuddered and stopped. Fire erupted from the engine compartment. 3 down, 2 to go. The 4th tank turned its turret towards Vlug. The gunner had spotted him. The 37mm gun fired and a round passed so close to Vlug's head that he felt the shockwave. It missed by inches. The machine gun opened up, spraying bullets in his direction. Vlug dove behind a large tree. Bark and wood chips were exploding around him, so he crawled forward, staying low, using the terrain as cover. He needed to get closer. The tank was 80 yards away now. He moved another 20 yards forward, then stopped behind a boulder. He loaded another rocket. His hands were steady, his breathing was controlled. He popped up, aimed, and fired in one smooth motion. The rocket hit the tank's front hull. The shape charge punched through, and the tank stopped moving, with smoke pouring from the hatches. 4 down, 1 to go. The 5th tank commander had watched 4 tanks die in less than 25 minutes. He made a decision. Retreat. The tank reversed hard, backing up fast. The driver was skilled, keeping the tank straight even at speed. Vlug grabbed his last rocket. This was round 5 of 6. He had 1 more after this. But if he missed this shot, that last rocket would have to count. He aimed carefully. The tank was moving, creating a harder target. Vlug led the tank, aiming where it would be, not where it was, and he fired. The rocket went towards the target. It struck the rear of the tank, hitting the engine compartment. The thin rear armor offered no protection. The rocket penetrated and detonated inside the engine. The explosion was catastrophic. Fuel ignited. The tank veered sharply to the right, out of control. It smashed through the underbrush at the side of the road and tumbled down a steep embankment. It rolled twice before coming to a rest upside down at the bottom. 5 down, 0 to go. Vlug stood up. 30 minutes had passed since the first tank appeared. 5 Japanese tanks destroyed. 5 rockets fired. 5 hits, 5 kills. He picked up the bazooka, slung it over his shoulder, and walked back towards the roadblock. The other American soldiers were staring at him. No one spoke for several seconds. Then one soldier said, "Did you just destroy 5 tanks by yourself?" Vlug nodded. Another soldier asked if he was hit. Vlug checked himself. Not a scratch. He had been under intense machine gun fire and cannon fire for 30 minutes and walked away without a wound. The battalion commander arrived an hour later. He inspected the destroyed tanks. All 5 were confirmed kills. He asked Vlug to explain what happened. Vlug gave a brief report, saw tanks, grabbed a bazooka, destroyed the tanks. The commander asked if Vlug realized he had just performed one of the most remarkable individual actions of the war. Vlug said he was just doing his job. The commander filed a report recommending Vlug for the Medal of Honor. The battle for Leyte continued for several more weeks. Ormoc City had been captured by the 77th Infantry Division on December the 10th, 5 days before Vlug's action. But Japanese forces were still operating west and north of the city. They were trying to hold open supply routes and evacuation routes. The tanks Vlug destroyed were part of that effort. If those tanks had broken through the roadblock, they could have reached American positions farther north and caused significant casualties. Infantry units would have been overrun. Supply columns would have been destroyed. Vlug's action prevented that. By stopping the tanks, he protected hundreds of American soldiers who never knew who saved them. By late December, organized Japanese resistance on Leyte was collapsing. The final major port, Palumpon, was captured on December 25th, Christmas Day. General MacArthur declared the end of organized resistance. But isolated Japanese units continued fighting into early 1945. Some held out in the mountains until the end of the war. The 126th Infantry Regiment remained on Leyte through January 1945, conducting patrols and clearing operations. Vlug participated in these operations. He survived the war without serious injury and was discharged on June 14, 1945. In early 1946, Vlug received notification that he would be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. President Harry S. Truman presented the medal to him at the White House. The citation described his actions in detail. It emphasized that Vlug had acted alone, under fire, loading the bazooka single-handedly. It noted that he destroyed 5 enemy tanks in 30 minutes. It said, through his sustained heroism in the face of superior forces, Private First Class Vlug alone destroyed 5 enemy tanks and greatly facilitated successful accomplishment of his battalion's mission. After the war, Vlug returned to Grand Rapids, Michigan. The city celebrated their first Medal of Honor recipient with a massive parade. Thousands of people lined the streets. The mayor gave a speech. The community had raised donations to help Vlug build and furnish a home for himself and his new bride. It was a generous gesture from a grateful community. Vlug joined the Michigan National Guard in May 1949 and served until January 1951, retiring with the rank of Master Sergeant. Then, he went to work as a mail carrier. He delivered mail in Grand Rapids for decades. He walked the same routes, delivered letters and packages, and spoke with the people on his route. Most of them had no idea they were talking to a Medal of Honor recipient. Vlug never mentioned it. He rarely spoke about the war. When people asked, he would say he served in the Pacific and leave it at that. When pressed about the tanks, he would say he did what needed to be done and change the subject. Dirk Vlug died on June 25, 1996 at the age of 79. He was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Grand Rapids. His Medal of Honor citation is still studied at military schools as an example of individual initiative, courage under fire, and the effective use of anti-tank weapons. He demonstrated what one trained soldier with the right weapon can accomplish when the situation demands it.